The only thing that we're interested in is putting money in your wallet. If you want to bet the fights, if you want to have a little bit of action, you are in the right place. With my partner, Ian Parker, I am Brett Okamoto.
We're ready to rock between our parlays, our props, our straight picks. It's time to make money. Let's go.
Welcome back in, everybody, to an episode of UFC Best Bets. You're looking at the UFC Apex facility in Las Vegas. It's right off of that 215 highway. You can't see it in the background, but a strip not too far behind it. And we are excited to get back to UFC Fight Night after a week off last week. Of course, 2 weeks ago, we had UFC 270 in Anaheim. Francis Ngannou with a big win over Cyril Gane. We did well on that card, and we are back to do well again at a UFC Fight Night featuring Jack Hermansson and Sean Strickland with my guy, Ian Parker. Ian, how you feeling after the week off? Hope you enjoyed a little bit of a break before heading into this next one.
You know what? Gave me some extra time to really dive into this. This is a really exciting fight. I think it's flying under the radar, even though it's a main event. You got two guys that are trying to work their way to the top in the middleweight division. And who doesn't want to see if Sean Strickland at this point in his career, he is an absolute character. I can't wait to see this fight.
I agree, man. It's an intriguing main event. And like you mentioned, it's almost like we had a bye week. You're that NFL coach coming off the bye. So we were expecting some big things here for this UFC Fight Night card. Before we get into it, let's look at UFC 270. Again, that was 2 weeks ago. And Ian, you did pretty well on that one. 3-1 in your best bets. That is what we're looking for, my friend, including an underdog pick in the main event. Francis Ngannou, he had to make it interesting for us by losing the first 2 rounds to Cyril Gane, but then what a championship performance by my guy Francis, getting it done, retaining the belt, defending the belt. He's still the UFC heavyweight champion, baddest man on the planet, and we got him at plus 125 thanks to Ian Parker. So let's jump right into UFC Fight Night this weekend. As you mentioned, Jack Hermansson facing Sean Strickland, a middleweight main event. You can watch it on ESPN Plus. The main card starts at 7 Eastern, 4 Pacific. It is a 6-fight main card. Some decent fights to look at, some interesting ones to break down from a gambling perspective, some big lines here to talk about. Are we taking some chalky favorites, or are we going with some big underdogs here? I'm interested to hear about all of that, but let's jump into the main event here. Jack Hermansson, Sean Strickland. As you mentioned, man, Sean Strickland's getting a lot of attention from some crazy things that he's saying on the mic, but behind the scenes, almost quietly, this guy has the second longest win streak in the division. He's also been kind of a favorite of the books. He's been installed as a favorite a lot of these fights. In fact, he hasn't been an underdog, I think, until you got to go all the way back to him fighting Kamaru Usman years ago. So what are you thinking about Sean Strickland as a guy just in this division getting a lot of attention, and that line has sort of been there all along the way? What are your thoughts on Sean Strickland going into this one?
Well, look, you got a guy here who's definitely come out of his shell a little bit. He's not necessarily going down the Colby Covington route, but he's just being himself, and himself is a character, to say the least. But the one thing about him that people need to really understand, this is a very hard-working fighter. He takes his job seriously. As much as he talks about all these other ancillary things in his life, it always comes back to he knows who he is. He is a fighter at heart. He loves his job, and he is here to win. You know, do I really believe that he should be this big of a favorite over someone like Jack Hermansson? I do not. I think Sean Strickland is doing the right thing. He's fought the right people along the way, but he hasn't fought top 5 yet. You know, I don't think Uriah Hall was top 5 when he fought him. I think Jack Hermansson has just fought higher level competition, winning or losing. He is someone that does not get put away so easily. He is a threat on the ground, which is where Strickland's going to have to really protect himself there. And this will be the second main event we see out of Sean Strickland. So I'm very curious to see how he does against a true top 5 opponent, in my opinion, in the division that possesses, essentially, stylistically, a little bit of a difficult matchup for him, potentially.
Yeah, I mean, you read my mind in a lot of what you said, Ian, because I'm looking at Sean Strickland, and again, I go back and look at, the betting lines on him in some of his most recent fights, and this guy is a guy that Vegas believes in, and I get it. His record is 24-3. As you mentioned, he gets a lot of attention for some of the things he says, but that does not take away from the fact that this guy is just prepared. He does enjoy his job. You can tell that when he's fighting. He's not really a guy who you're worried about having an off night, because he's just there mentally and physically every single time. But this guy was, a minus 210 favorite, I believe, against Uriah Hall. Now he's minus 220 against Jack Hermansson. I mean, if Jack Hermansson and Uriah Hall fought, what would that line be? I just think Jack Hermansson is getting a little bit snubbed here. How much do we think he's getting snubbed? I mean, what would you put this line at?
Well, I actually love what you just said about the whole thing with him and Uriah Hall, because I would probably have Jack Hermansson at minus 190 right now. If he was to fight Uriah Hall instead of Sean Strickland at the moment, he'd be almost a 2-1 favorite. You're talking about a guy, Jack Hermansson, that made it competitive against Marvin Vettori when he was a huge underdog there. Against Kelvin Gastelum, he's very dangerous everywhere. He's a good striker, not a great striker, but he's a very high-level IQ fighter. He doesn't put himself in bad positions. He doesn't go for broke. He's not risky, but this is someone that also doesn't force finishes, but still has, I believe, over a 70% finishing rate. Now, he is going against someone, Sean Strickland, who really just doesn't get finished. And Jack himself is not someone that gets finished in this fight. However, I do think that if you are going to bet this fight one side or the other, I do think the value is on Jack Hermansson. It's not to say that I believe Sean Strickland can't get this done, but I don't think a 2-1 favorite makes a whole lot of sense. For me in this fight, I'm going to go with over 4.5 rounds. I think this fight goes all the whole way based on the respect and the toughness of both competitors. You saw in the fight, Jack was really, I think he got dropped against Marvin Vettori in round 1 or early in round 2. And he kind of had a little bit of a comeback. He did it all on the feet where he's not the most comfortable. And in this fight, Strickland's the better boxer. It could be something similar. Strickland's also a good wrestler, good takedown defense, an underrated grappling game. We know if Hermansson puts Strickland on his back, that's where the threat can be. But again, I think between these two guys, their fight IQ, and I know it's probably silly the way you see Sean Strickland on Twitter, but he's also he's a very smart fighter once he's in there. I like this fight going the distance. I think we're going to be in for a 5-round banger between these two.
Yeah, I agree. I love it when I disagree with you, Ian, because then we can go back and forth a little bit and I can try to understand a little bit more of the way you're thinking. But I'm right there with you. I do think that this fight is likely to go the distance for all the reasons you said. I think both these guys are smart. I think they're very durable. Yeah, so, you always hear this line. It's kind of the cliche line in gambling. It's a dog or pass situation. And this is what it sounds like that the main event is. Dog or pass. You're not going to bet Sean Strickland. If you want to bet Hermansson, go ahead and do it. Are you doing it? How intrigued are you by the fact that you can get a guy like Jack Hermansson, who, again, has far more experience fighting at a higher level, at plus 180? Do you like that? Or do you think just from a stylistic point, as much as you kind of want to take a shot on the dog, that it's just not worth it in this situation?
You know what? It just, for me, if you want to play this safe and you want to bet, responsibly or with discipline, I like to call it, you kind of wait and see how you're doing. Because towards the end of the night, if you're playing with house money, if you're up and you want to take a shot at an underdog, in my opinion, you're getting tremendous value out of someone in him. Now, if you're really high on Sean Strickland by decision, I think you're getting plus odds there. But for me, look at the stats of Jack Hermansson. 4.86 strikes per minute, the 17 takedowns. That's a big deal here because he's going against somebody in Strickland who has very good takedown defense. But we know once it gets to the floor, if Hermansson is on top, he does not lay and pray. He will fish for submissions, and that will cause Strickland a little bit of problems. Not saying again he gets submitted, but having to fight off your back against a guy like Jack who's on top, who not only favors the position, is very good with submissions. I do agree with you there. I think he is worth a play if you're going to take a side. But if you want to go with Strickland, I'd say by decision. He's not a finisher himself, and Jack is very durable.
Okay, so it sounds like the play to go to, though, is the over. And it's funny, when you're taking the over 4.5 rounds, that clock can move real slow when you're watching that fight. But I do think the clock is going to tick in this 185-pound fight. Let's talk about the co-main event. It was staying in the 185-pound division. It's Puna Soriano taking on Nicholas Maximov, who, of course, Maximov, everybody knows, Nick Diaz Army guy, protege of Nate Diaz. Those two are close friends. He was on the Contender Series. He fought all the way up at heavyweight when he was on the Contender Series. Got a contract. He's now back to 185, taking on Soriano, who's coming off of the first loss of his career, but against a very good opponent in Brendan Allen. He is the favorite, minus 190 against Nate Diaz's guy, Maximov, plus 160. How do you see this one going?
I like Puna here. I think he comes from a very good camp. I think that camp with Eric Nissick and Extreme Couture shows that when guys do come back off a loss, very much can bounce back. They go back to the drawing board. They don't just sit there and complain. They find a way. And the level of competition here and the seasoning of Puna, I think, is really what gets it done. He's just fought way better competition. It's not to say that Maximov won't have a bright career, but a lot of the times when these guys come from the Contender Series, they jump into the deep water. And I think Puna is that step into deep water. I just think stylistically, it's not great for Maximov. I think Puna should be a heavier favorite. I think we're kind of getting a deal here, even though minus 190 is not cheap. He fought the best we've ever seen out of Brendan Allen, which we expect Brendan Allen to fight at that level. Fights before that, Puna looked fantastic. And I just think that this is going to come down to experience and level of competition. And for me, that favors Puna. We're going to go that way.
Okay, moving to the welterweight division, Shavkat Rakhmonov taking on Carlston Harris. Harris is 2-0 in the UFC, but there's a lot more intrigue on Rakhmonov, who is undefeated, comes from Kazakhstan. The guys in the know, the people in this industry, they're talking about this guy like he is going to be a problem in this welterweight division. Do you agree, Ian? What is the ceiling on Rakhmonov, and do you think minus 230 is appropriate or is a little too high here against a guy who's 2-0 in the UFC and Harris?
Well, I think it's way too high here. Rakhmonov, look at the level of competition he's fought. Alex Oliveira, which this is not the same Cowboy Oliveira we've seen over the years. He's a guy who, instead of using his jiu-jitsu, he comes out and he brawls and he gets caught. He gasses out real quick. And then Michel Pereira's kind of the same thing. I mean, he was like 2 feet shorter than Rakhmonov, and the reach wasn't there. And he got submitted with a very, not a lazy rear naked choke, but just Pereira, who really doesn't ever get submitted. That was just way too easy. Carlston Harris is a very good prospect, too. I'm actually surprised. The UFC usually doesn't do this. You don't put 2 high-level prospects against each other this early in the career. I think both guys have a tremendously bright future in this division. I don't understand why it's minus 230 when Harris just knocked out Impa, who's, in my opinion, UFC caliber. Granted, he's not there anymore. I think Impa is actually a higher-level fight than Pereira at this point. So for me, man, I'm going to go over 1.5. Granted, these guys are both finishing machines. Sometimes when that happens, guys come out a little bit hesitant. They're a little bit more reserved. They just kind of figure it out. And both guys, I think, have a lot to lose here in this situation because I think they're both highly touted prospects. I think Harris is flying under the radar, though, so I don't blame you for taking a shot at him. But for me, over 1.5.
I like that, though, man, because I think a lot of people are going to be looking at this card, seeing all these big favorites. Rakhmonov, again, he's kind of a darling sort of within the community. I've heard great things about him, but maybe you want to leave him off of your parlay. If you're looking at this card and you're wanting to throw together a parlay, maybe leave Rakhmonov off of it because people are sleeping potentially on Carlston Harris. Okay, let's go to the light heavyweight division, man, and let's go to a guy by the name of Sam Smiling Alvey. And Ian, a lot of times we bring up these full screens. We're talking about guys who are on such a roll, guys who are on fire. This is the opposite of that. He's on a winless streak of 7. His last win goes all the way back to 2018 against Jean Vellante, who was kind of moving up in weight at that point in his career. Jean really was. I got to be honest, Ian. I'm not being mean here or anything, but I don't know what we're doing with Sam Alvey here anymore. I don't understand why he's kind of still climbing into the UFC octagon. Dana White was asked that recently, and he said, "Hey, this guy always brings it." I would beg to differ. I would say that Sam Alvey's fights can be a little slow, that his volume is not always there. He is fighting Brendan Allen, who is the 3rd opponent now that he's been scheduled against because he's had a couple fights fall through. And I don't think it's a good sign, Ian, when you go from he's a 3-1 betting underdog in his first original matchup. That fight falls through, then he gets Phil Hawes, then he's a 3-1 betting underdog. Okay, fine, we'll replace him with Brendan Allen on 10 days' notice. He's still a 3-1 betting underdog. I mean, all these circumstances have to increase your odds at winning a fight, right? Not if you're Sam Alvey. So you look at this situation and say, hey, man, Sam Alvey hasn't won in a long time, but circumstances almost demand that we take a shot on him because these odds aren't changing no matter who they throw in under what circumstances. Break this down for me. Why is Sam Alvey still here? And can you bet him? Can you put any money on this guy at this point?
Look, you can bet anything you want. It doesn't mean that it's a good play. For Sam Alvey, I think Dana really does look at him as someone who he knows he's going to come and fight. He could fight prospects, other seasoned guys, and he's going to look for the finish. Sam Alvey's not going in there clinching for 3 rounds. He's not going to look to grapple. He's trying to land that one shot and be done with a smile on his face. Maybe he's like a modern day Chris Lieben, which is not as exciting. We kept Chris Lieben around after he lost a bunch, although to Lieben's defense, he knocked out Vanderlei Silva when he wasn't supposed to. This is an interesting fight for me, though, Brett. Brendan Allen is going up to 205 on short notice, and I don't know how much Brendan Allen's really been training for this fight. If you follow him on social media, he specifically has said, even recently, when he's out of camp, he only does jiu-jitsu and training like once a week because he lives so far away from where he trains when he's not in camp, right? And he'll lift weights, he'll go for runs. Maybe he sees this fight as, hey, I know that I can go up in weight. All I got to do is get Sam Alvey to the ground, and I win, right? But is it going to be that easy? Does Sam Alvey get taken down that easy? So for me, my notes literally for this fight was yikes. That was my notes when I saw this because it was literally like, yikes, I can't trust Brendan Allen in this spot at minus 400. It's not worth it to put him in a parlay. If you want to take Brendan Allen by submission, I don't even think you're getting that great of odds. So if any time I take a shot at Sam Alvey, maybe this is it. But for me, I am staying away and just staying away.
Might be time, bathroom run or get yourself a soda, pop some popcorn during this fight because, yeah, I agree. I mean, obviously Brendan Allen has shown a lot of promise, and I'm looking forward to the rest of his career. But in terms of this one in particular, hey man, they needed someone to step in. This fight is going to happen. I don't think we're going to learn too much about either guy in it, but. Yeah, probably shouldn't bet any money on it either. Let's move on to a more interesting fight, in my opinion. It is what was supposed to be the Ultimate Fighter finale. Tresean Gore taking on Bryan Battle. A lot of us, I think, were very excited to see this matchup. Unfortunately, Gore was injured. Gilbert Urbina stepped in for him, and Bryan Battle won that to become the tough winner. And he is the tough winner. I don't think it's fair to say, like, this is for the real tough championship. No, Bryan Battle won that, but Gore coming in with far less experience. He's a very inexperienced guy. He is the favorite, though, minus 160. Bryan Battle coming back at plus 135. Can you bet confidently on Gore just because you haven't seen much out of him, or do you think that from what you've seen, he gets the job done at minus 160?
There's two schools of thought. Right? Yes. Normally when a guy is 3-0, lack of experience, and essentially you kind of just watch him grow up on the Ultimate Fighter, you tend to back off. But for me, I kind of believe in Tresean Gore a little bit here. I think this is a guy who's just one of those people that he's wise in talent beyond his years and beyond what his record speaks. I think his power, his athleticism is very interesting. He's very coachable from what we've seen. His IQ is there. And if he touches you, even with half a punch, you're going to sleep. The thing with Bryan Battle that concerns me, I think Battle is a very tough guy. And Brett, you said it perfectly. He is the Ultimate Fighter champion. You can't take it away because his opponent got injured. So I don't look at this as, it's for the real thing. I just think this makes sense for both fighters from a matchup standpoint. Bryan Battle, in my opinion, though, loses this fight because his last two fights he's had to come from behind both times after losing in round one to win by submission. Against a guy like Gore, that's not happening. He's not gassing out. I'm going to go with Gore here at minus 160. I think he'll be too much for Battle in round one. Battle won't be able to have a comeback victory for a third time in a row. Give me Gore to win this one, buddy.
All right, so from the 185-pound division, we go to the 145-pound division to round out this main card. Julian Erosa taking on Steven Peterson, two guys who have been fighting for a long time. I mean, these two guys are more than 20 years of experience between the two under their belts. Erosa, big-time favorite, minus 310. How do you see this one going?
Yeah, I like Julian Erosa here. I think this fight really favors him. I know he always does look for the finish. He's an exciting fighter. I think his IQ has gotten better as he's now had another opportunity in the UFC. He doesn't want to blow that. He wants to put together a consistent winning streak. So I'm going to say that he wins this one by decision. I think Peterson's pretty durable here. I think Erosa is going to be very careful on going for the kill when the opportunity's there. Does not want to get a loss in this situation when he's supposed to win. And Erosa, though, I think it's reasonable at minus 310 to throw him in a parlay, but for all intents and purposes, by decision, and we're going to get plus odds there.
Yeah, man, plus 163. That's nice on a minus 310 favorite for the fight overall. Okay, that rounds off the main card. Let's get to one of my favorite parts of each episode, your parlay, Ian. What are we putting together to hopefully win some big money here?
Well, we're going to go back to the well with Julian Erosa. Now we don't have to worry about the prop. We just need him to get it done at 3-1. I believe he does. Alexis Davis. Look, her last fight, she came up on the losing end by decision. Before that, Sabina Mazo gave her the veteran treatment and won. Her opponent is really only known for the armbar. If she doesn't get caught in an armbar, she wins this fight. I like Alexis Davis to get it done. And Jalton Almeida is a very exciting prospect. Danilo Marquez, we've seen that gas tank empty out. He's very, very suspect when he gets put on his back. I like Almeida to get it done. Plus 134, that's our parlay.
Okay, so a few of those on the prelims, and let's take a look at those prelims real quickly here. We got 7 of them all together. Some interesting names there. Miles John is a guy who has done very well in the UFC. I think he gets overlooked sometimes in that very stacked bantamweight division. You got Chidi Njokuani coming off of a Contender Series win. I think he's an exciting guy to watch. Alexis Davis, you just mentioned, is on your parlay. Jason Witt versus Phil Rowe, sort of an interesting fight there. Two guys at welterweight who are looking to find their footing in the UFC. What stands out to you, Ian, from a betting perspective on this fight night prelims?
Well, I will say, low key, that is a pretty fun prelims. There's a lot of guys that are flying under the radar there that will be exciting to see as their journey goes. But for me, Phil Rowe, Jason Witt, I like Phil Rowe at minus 125. You know, with Witt, we saw in that last fight against Barberena. He made it ugly. He grappled. And Barberena just didn't have it that night. Phil Rowe, in my opinion, way too athletic. Takedown defense, excellent. Sometimes he gets a little slow in that first round, which I don't love. However, in his last fight, we saw that change and the results showed. He got it done very impressively. He will be the way better striker here. And if he even puts Witt on his back, Rowe can dominate from top. I think these odds should be Rowe minus 185. So at minus 125, I am more than happy to take a shot with Philly Fresh. Phil Rowe, let's go.
Hey, minus 185. There is some value there. If you were correct on that one, then we need to be jumping on Phil Rowe. Okay, so we're taking Phil Rowe, but I'm interested in all your picks, Ian. You want to run through them real quickly? Who are we taking throughout the entire prelims on Saturday?
Here we go. So I like Almeida and Marquez under 1.5 rounds at minus 120. You know, Marquez gas tank isn't great. Almeida's a finisher. Phil Rowe. And I like Bodner here, but minus 270, a little too much. I like him to get it done inside the distance. I believe your odds go down to minus 120 out of 5 losses for Gordon, 4 of them. He got finished. Bodner is a finishing machine, so we're going to go that way. And to add to it, you know what? Miles John does... Yeah, sorry, I jumped the gun on that one. Miles John does get overlooked, but believe it or not, I kind of like Castaneda as the underdog in that fight. I think his striking is threatening. I think Johns gets a little sloppy. Triziano and Dawodu goes the distance. Both guys extremely durable. Those odds are a little high. I would throw that in a separate parlay for the undercard. Nokiani's been around for a little bit. If he can keep this fight standing, which I think he can, striking-wise, he's the better one there. And again, for me, Alexis Davis, if you want to take that by itself to win by decision at minus 120, I do not see her getting finished by armbar. She'll be the better grappler, better striker. She's just not a finisher herself, so by decision at minus 120, that should round out the early prelims for us, Brett.
Yeah, a lot of history there with Alexis Davis. Her last 5 fights have gone to the decision. Well, there it is. Jack Hermansson versus Sean Strickland. As you mentioned, Ian, this one seems to be flying under the radar, but I think stylistically, this fight is super intriguing, super interesting. Maybe not one of the sexiest guys in terms of challenging Israel Adesanya for the championship anytime soon, but from just a single fight perspective, man, I like these guys a lot. I like the way this matches up. I like this UFC Fight Night main event. So without further ado, let's get to the steak and potatoes of this program. Your best bets. What are we going with on Saturday?
We're going to start off. Ultimate Fighter guys, supposed to fight for the championship. They will now. Tresean Gore over Brian Battle. We also like Phil Rowe to be Jason Witt. Almeida Marquez under 1.5. The big boys. Someone's going out before that second round, in my opinion. I like Bodner to win inside the distance against Malcolm. Like I said before, out of his 5 losses, 4 he was finished. And for the main event, over 4.5 rounds. I think both guys, exciting fight, very durable, hard to finish. Instead of having to choose a side, let's enjoy the 5-round banger, and we're going to go over 4.5 there.
I like it, man. It's a chalky card, but finding some props, finding some different way to bet these fights gets us closer to even odds on all of your best bets. So I'm all for it. And you got a few of them in there as well. So we got the best bets. We got the parlay. That is it for this week's episode of UFC Best Bets. Thank you for tuning in. Enjoy the fights on Saturday and come back and you can thank us on Twitter, on Instagram, anytime you want for all that cash we are adding to your income in 2022. We'll see you next week.